Good afternoon, everyone. This is Congresswoman Shontel Brown. Thank you to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to the team at the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for taking part in this webinar. Human trafficking is a huge area of concern for people in Northeast Ohio. We saw that last year when we hosted a trafficking prevention summit in Cleveland. People are concerned, they're worried, and they want to learn more about how to keep their loved ones safe. That's what this webinar is all about. The good news is that we've really ramped up our federal effort to combat human trafficking, and it's been a real bipartisan effort. DHS now has a Center for Human Trafficking to coordinate efforts. Convictions of traffickers are up, and the agency is also leading the Blue campaign, which is helping to educate the public. Before we get started with presentations, I want to introduce and recognize those joining us today. Kathy Reese from the Office of Congressional Affairs, U.S. Immigration and Customs is with us today. Hector Feliciano, Assistant Special Agent in charge of Homeland Security Investigations out of the Cleveland office, is also joining us. Valentina Seeley, Deputy Assistant Director, Office of Partnership and Engagement of the Homeland Security Investigations. Lindsay Gashke, Special Agent, Homeland Security Investigations, also from the Cleveland office. Jomel Aird, Victim Assistance Program Specialist, Homeland Security Investigations here in Ohio. This is a tremendous group of experts who understand this problem from a global perspective, but can also talk about what's happening right here at home. And later in the program, you'll have the ability to ask questions in the chat. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Reese.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you, Congresswoman Brown. Hello, everyone. As said, I'm Kathy Reese, Congressional Liaison of the ICE Office of Congressional Relations, and we work along with our Homeland Security Investigations team, known as HSI, to ensure that we are responsive to Congress, whether it's a briefing request, a phone call, a meeting, any type of congressional engagement, we are in support. And of course, one of our goals is to build on our relationships with congressional members and staff. Here joining us today is to tell you a little bit more about HSI, is our Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Cleveland area, Hector Feliciano. And I'll turn it over to Hector at this time.
All right, thank you, Kathy. First, I'd like to thank Congresswoman Brown and her staff for leading the charge on getting information regarding this important topic out to the community. As Kathy mentioned, I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge for Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, here in the Cleveland area. And for those of you who have never heard of HSI, we're actually the second largest federal investigative agency, only behind the FBI, and we're the principal investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security. We have approximately 10,000 employees, nearly 7,000 of which are special agents in over 260 cities throughout the country, as well as over 93 offices in 54 countries throughout the world. HSI is tasked with investigating over 400 federal crimes related to transnational crime and threats that seek to exploit customs and immigration laws. This includes crimes such as narcotics trafficking, weapons trafficking, money laundering, customs and immigration fraud, and also a couple of the topics that we'll be discussing today, human trafficking and child exploitation. Here locally, my office covers all of Northern Ohio, which is basically the 40 counties that make up the Northern District of Ohio. We have approximately 30 special agents that cover these areas and investigate these crimes. As we get into the presentations, we thought it was important to discuss not only the risks associated with human trafficking, but also some of the other threats children and teens are facing as it relates to child exploitation and sextortion, and also some of the resources that are out there in the event that someone you know is victimized. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Valentina Seeley. As Congresswoman mentioned, she's the Acting Deputy Assistant Director for the Office of Partnership and Engagement.
Thank you, Hector. Valentina Seeley with the Office of Partnership and Engagement. And I just want to start off by thanking Congresswoman Shontel Brown and her amazing team, as well as our HSI team, ASAC Feliciano, for your commitment and your collaboration as it relates to this important topic. I can tell you that we value and we place a high priority on engagement with our communities throughout the nation and in Ohio. This is a sensitive topic, but it's a topic worth talking about. It's a topic worth exploring, and we couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity to share information and connect with our stakeholders, our educators, our parents, our communities throughout Ohio. And again, we can't say enough about Representative Brown's commitment to this collaboration. I can tell you that human trafficking and child sex exploitation happens throughout the nation, and it happens in Ohio. I can tell you that there's a commitment on our part to continue to engage with you. As you watch our presentation today, please think about ways that we can continue to collaborate, think about ways that we can continue to take our message to youth, and think about ways that we can continue to engage on this important topic. It's worth exploring, it's worth talking about, it's worth protecting our communities. With that said, let's begin our formal presentation. I'll turn it over to Special Agent Lindsay Goschke. Lindsay.
Thank you, Valentina. If you'll just give me all 1 minute to get the PowerPoint loaded up, and we can begin. No, from the beginning. I'm not sure why we're not working here.
Go down to the very bottom of the screen where it looks like a slide. Yep, right there.
There we go. Okay. Oh, no. Sorry, Jamal, that's not quite the one. I need it to be this way. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. I think we're all set. Okay, so this will be our Human Trafficking and Internet Safety webinar hosted by Rep. Brown. Okay, and this is just a little bit about HSI. As Hector said earlier, we are the second largest federal law enforcement agency, and we do investigate child exploitation, human trafficking, and a wealth of other things. So I won't go into this too much since he already covered that. And I'd kind of like to start the child internet safety portion of this presentation with a short video.
When I was just starting out, it was harder. You really had to keep things hush hush. But then the internet came along and everything changed. Now we hide in plain sight and share all kinds of things. We review, rate, make recommendations, just like anything else out there. Pre-internet, you know how hard it was to pretend to be a 9-year-old girl? Now I just roll up looking like their BFF. And the best part, the only people who could stop me pretend I don't exist. You ask me, there's never been a better time to be a monster.
Okay, so next I'm going to highlight a few case examples which illustrate just how sexual predators interact with one another and with children around the world. The first I'll discuss is a global network that was actually dedicated to exploiting children. In 2015, July, Patrick Faulty from Franklin, Tennessee, created a website called the gift box exchange as a Tor hidden service. For those that don't know, Tor is an online network that enables anonymity by directing internet traffic through thousands of relays to conceal a user's location. On the gift box, Faulty acted as the lead administrator of the site and it had established rules that required users to upload and share images and videos depicting preteen children being sexually abused before they could access the website. In September 2015, Benjamin Faulkner from Ontario, Canada, joined Faulty in the operation of the gift box and became an administrator of the site as well. When the gift box was eventually shut down in November of 2016, it had over 72,000 registered users and about 56,000 posts. Faulkner had also created and administered another Tor network site that was dedicated to the sexual exploitation of children and had grown to host over 200,000 users. In addition to running these online networks, Faulty and Faulkner actually traveled multiple times to engage in the sexual abuse of a toddler to whom they had gained access through the gift box. Faulkner also separately traveled to Texas to sexually abuse a toddler and produce sexual abuse material of an infant. Both of these guys were eventually sentenced to 35 years for their crimes. Unfortunately, this type of thing also affects us in Ohio. So I will just discuss actually a case of mine that is pretty recent and unfortunately very close to home. From January 2022 through May of 2023, an adult man from Ravenna, Ohio, used popular social media and dating applications to connect with minor children across the globe. While purporting himself to be a teenage girl, the subject directed and extorted real minor teens to create and send nude images and videos of themselves. Although the victim identification is still ongoing, it appears that this subject communicated with more than 70 minor teenagers from at least 32 different states and 2 other countries within this 16-month period. This subject was charged with several counts of actual and attempted production of child exploitation material and was just sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for his crimes. So where do our leads come from? How do all these well-camouflaged offenders come to our attention? While HSI is able to develop leads from undercover activities and offender account takeovers, we also receive information from state and local partners, as well as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, also known as NCMEC, which receives most of its tips from tech companies. Tips are generated when a user violates the terms and services agreed upon at the time of their account creation by using their account to either store or share files of child sexual abuse material. As you can see here, the number of reports submitted each year have more than doubled since 2019. So it's never too early to talk to kids about the dangers of the internet and how to protect themselves online. All children, regardless of safeguarding, will be vulnerable to some degree. Whether it's talking about account security or talking about what information they're putting out there, it's important to keep an open dialogue with your kids that reiterates that they can always come to you if something happens, whether that's sextortion, cyberbullying, or just inappropriate posts. The main reason why kids are addicted to social media and why they're so vulnerable has to do with the fact that their brains aren't quite done developing yet. Kids often use social media as a source of dopamine, but the ability to make decisions and accept those consequences that come with those decisions doesn't quite develop until their mid to late 20s. So what are kids doing online? I think we'd all agree in saying that it would be shorter if we asked what aren't kids doing online. Posting pictures, creating videos, chatting, gaming, streaming, you name it, and kids are probably doing it online. The next few slides will highlight the most popular social media apps as of January 2024. We should all know a little bit about these and you'll probably recognize a lot. Unfortunately, with time constraints, we can't dive too deeply into them, but please feel free to take a picture so you can familiarize yourself later. Here are our top 10 as of January 2024. Facebook Messenger, those are probably pretty common to most people. Life 360, Discord, maybe not so common. We see a lot of Discord, unfortunately, in our child exploitation cases, just because of the access that it gives predators to people all over the world. Here's some other popular ones: Instagram, WhatsApp, our lovely Snapchat, and Omegle, may it rest in peace. A few more, everyone's favorite TikTok, a few dating apps like Scout, Meet Me, the home of anonymity, Whisper, and then the last slide. Most of these are chatting type apps. I know I breezed through those very quickly, but if you look them up on either your App Store or your Play Store, you'll be able to learn more about them and the functionality that comes with each. Online predators and their grooming tactics. So how does this all happen? Well, it starts with one of the biggest dangers that we all face when it comes to the internet: anonymity. All internet users can be whoever they want online. Online predators often mask their true identity by creating profiles of a young adult or teenager, and then use images they either find online or have received from a real child. They use these fake profiles to befriend real children, build their trust, and eventually exploit that trust for their own gain. This process can be called, or is known as, grooming. In addition to the few grooming techniques that are listed on the screen, it's very common for offenders to use the information and images or videos that they solicit from children as leverage to entice either an in-person meet or to extort the child for additional photos or videos. So I just mentioned that offenders often use information that they have about children as leverage, but I think it's important to understand that this information doesn't just come from the typed chat messages or voice calls that these people might be having with our kids. Within several social media applications, children inadvertently give out information about their home address, school, and places they enjoy going. For example, Snapchat features the Snap Map, which allows friends to track each other's geolocation in real time, straight down to your house. If you've ever seen it, it can be quite scary. You can, however, disable this by enabling the ghost mode on your child's profile. Instagram and Facebook allow users to tag locations from which photos were taken, and then photos and videos captured with a cell phone camera also store location data that can be searchable in the Maps application by anyone who ever receives that file. So this video here will actually show a little example of how sextortion can evolve.
Hey Zach, it's me. I can't stop thinking about you. I know you've been waiting for this for a while. I wanted to give you something special. Who are you? Why are you doing this?
Okay, so unfortunately, the messages that you saw on the screen are pretty accurate to what we see in the field as far as sextortion cases that we not only deal with locally in Cleveland, but abroad as well. Okay, so this is actually a recent article about a teenage boy that was sextorted for a financial gain. The offender in this case did not actually ask for more pictures or more videos. They wanted money instead. So I will explain a little bit about this one. On November 30th, 2022, Walker Montgomery, who had just turned 16, spent some time hunting with his father before having dinner with his family and going to bed. A little after midnight on December 1st, 2022, Walker ended his own life following an encounter on Instagram in which an unknown user sextorted him. This unknown user was posing as a female and had encouraged Walker to engage in a sexually explicit video chat. When Walker complied, the unknown user screen recorded the chat and demanded $1,000 to keep the video private. The unknown user threatened to send this video of Walker to his family and friends if the money was not sent. Walker then spent 2 hours explaining that he did not have the money, could not get the money, begged for the video not to be released, and finally told the user he was going to take his own life. So that's unfortunately a result that we're seeing more and more often. The time that it takes for these offenders to instill a real fear in these kids that they have nowhere to go and nowhere to turn is quick. I do believe that this one was less than 2 hours of a communication between the initial chat and then when Walker decided to take his own life. So again, reiterating how quickly these things can happen under your roof with not a single bit of knowledge. I know that his parents had kind of said that, you know, he was well liked, he was popular, he, you know, had strong family bonds. I don't know why he wouldn't come to us. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to, right? Is that these kids have something to lose. And that's why I'm saying there's no kid that's not vulnerable. It's often the kids that have the most to lose that are the most vulnerable. So what are some common indicators? There's a list on the screen for you to read over, but the bottom line is that predators are very skilled at manipulating children, and you know your children the best. You know if there's a sudden change in their behavior, if they're hiding things, if they're not hanging out with their friends anymore, not wanting to go to the movies or do things that they do all the time. So it's important, again, to just be mindful of those changes, have those open conversations, and, you know, understand that kids are doing the best with what they know. They want to make sure that they're not disappointing you as their parents. They don't want to, you know, be embarrassed by their friends or anything. So sometimes it puts them in a tricky situation where they can kind of act out of character. So next, I'll play another video that kind of illustrates what you can do if something does ever happen to your child online.
Okay, so you did a thing. You sent a picture of yourself with no clothes on. Something you thought wouldn't be shared. And in a polite society, cats wear clothes, right? Anyway, seemed like a good idea at the time, but now things have gone wrong, terribly wrong. Maybe you shared the picture with someone you loved and trusted, but after a while, things weren't so friendly. Or they said they'd help you become a star. They just wanted to use you. Or maybe you met someone online and they really seemed to understand you, but then it got weird, and it turned out to be someone totally different. Now the person you shared the pic with is demanding more and threatening to tell. That's sextortion. Yep, that's a thing. The perpetrator relies on you feeling ashamed and keeping quiet. But they are the ones who should be ashamed. What they are doing is wrong, and it's never too late to find your voice to ask for help, or too early to reach out to your friends to tell them you'll be there no matter what. In fact, you can stop sextortion before it starts by talking about it now. With support, you can do anything, and you can focus on the important business of being cats. So tell your closest friends today you've got their back no matter what.
Okay, so here are a few recommendations on how to maximize internet safety. If you read through these, you'll likely notice they're centered around minimizing risks and having open communication with your kids. We've actually learned that preventing kids from having cell phones or using social media sites only increases their desire to be evasive and keep things from you. So the best course of action is to be educated about what your kids are doing and who they're communicating with. If something does happen, it's important to stay calm. Encourage your child to discontinue communication with whoever the offender might be. Do what you can to preserve any usernames, profile pictures, profile, posts, things that we can, as law enforcement, use to then identify this person, try to catalog the messages and anything that would help us in the end. I know a lot of kids, once they get a little scared, they try to delete everything just to make it go away. But unfortunately, that makes our job a little bit harder on the back end. So, So here is my contact information, as well as our HSI tip line, the NCMEC phone number and cyber tip line website, as well as our local Ohio Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force webpage and email. The next slide I will show will also be a few resources, so feel free to take pictures if needed. Okay, at this point, I will turn this presentation over to our Victims Assistance Program Specialist, Jamel Aird.
Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about human trafficking here now. And there's also a lot of connection between what Lindsay just went over and human trafficking. So just to kind of lay the groundwork, I'm going to go ahead and define what human trafficking is. So there's, under the umbrella of human trafficking, there is labor trafficking and sex trafficking. Sometimes when people talk about human trafficking, the only thing they think about is sex trafficking and that's it. But there's another portion of it that's labor trafficking. And so what's involved in both labor and sex trafficking is recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, meaning providing for another person, and obtaining a person for labor services through force, fraud, or coercion. And for sex trafficking, those same elements exist if the person is 18 years old or older. But for someone who's under the age of 18, we don't have to prove or look into those other elements. The fact that they're under the age, they're considered a victim. Also something to highlight is that an immigration status or citizenship is not an element of human trafficking. So many times people kind of conflate that human smuggling and human trafficking are one and the same. Human smuggling specifically is the avoidance of the borders, right? And moving through that process without going through the normal chains and access to government ways of doing things. And so just because someone is smuggled does not mean trafficking has happened. For these other elements to be there, this is where you have human trafficking. Now, can someone who has been smuggled also be vulnerable to human trafficking? Absolutely. Just wanted to make sure that that's understood as to the difference between labor trafficking, sex trafficking, and it's all under the umbrella of human trafficking. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Jamel, I'm trying to tab it over and it's just not letting me. There we go.
Okay, so there are some misconceptions that people have when it comes to trafficking. Some people believe that, if the person is not trafficked, if they gave initial consent, if they have a relationship with the trafficker, if they fail to escape, if there was any sort of payments or compensation, if the trafficker was kind or generous at some point, if someone shows no signs of victimization, if it was a planned illegal border crossing, if the person entered the country legally, if the person is a citizen, they committed a crime, or if they lie or exist. These are all misconceptions. There are so many layers to the reality of trafficking, and we're gonna kind of talk about the reality of what that looks like. Next slide. Okay, so how traffickers operate. So we all have basic human needs, right? And so at the top corner, you see Maslow's hierarchy of needs. These are our basic human needs that we all have, right? We have our physiological needs. We need food, water, rest, shelter, those kind of things. Then up above that is our safety and security, to feel safe. Above that is love and belonging, to have intimate relationships, friendships, a sense of belonging. Above that is esteem, a feeling of accomplishment. And then on top of that is self-actualization. What traffickers do is they focus on how they can be able to interact with someone, find out where do they have a void in their life and how they can be able to meet that need. So if that person's need is food, a safe place to stay or to be, a trafficker may kind of enter in as, I have a safe place for you, I have food to give you, things like that. The person needs to feel safe and secure. They may offer those things. So as we get to know their potential victim, they focus on how can they be able to meet that need, build trust, build rapport, and then later on they end up exploiting and taking advantage of that victim and victimizing them. So every single one of us has probably felt vulnerable at some point in our lives, right? A vulnerability doesn't mean that you are going to be trafficked, right? But it is one of those things we call like the crack in the door a trafficker can be able to try to use in order to, again, build that rapport and build that trust with their victim, then later on exploit them. They will utilize manipulation, intimidation, violence and threats, all types of things to be able to kind of maintain that power and control over another individual. That is for juveniles and for adults. Next slide. So some indicators that might exist. Again, not one single indicator equals that somebody's being trafficked, but just so you guys are aware of all the different types of indicators that exist. This is both for sex and labor trafficking. And you'll see that there's some commonalities that exist between both. So again, I mentioned earlier that if someone's under the age of 18 and they are involved in providing commercial sex acts, then they can be considered for sure a victim. That the person feels pressured by their employer to stay in a job or situation that they want to leave. If they feel like they owe money to their employer or their recruiter, they're not being paid what was promised as well. A sense of fictional debt is also, debt bondage is also sometimes part of that interaction. They have limited control of their identification documents or money. A lot of times people think, well, you know, if they don't have any control, that's all that it looks like. But sometimes it's limited, right? So they may know where the documents are, but they may not have access to those documents. They may be working long continuous hours or in different levels of isolation. I like to talk about this part because when we think about the people who maybe clean our schools or clean our businesses, right? A lot of times some janitor companies happen during the daytime and sometimes things happen after hours. So people are out and about and they're, you know, in the community, but who has access to see them? Who has access to understand what they're going through? So we talk about this limited or different levels of isolation that someone might be experiencing. They may also feel threatened by their boss with deportation or other types of harm, maybe working in dangerous conditions or not have enough proper safety gear, training, adequate breaks, things like that. Someone may be participating in commercial sex acts, but they want to stop, but they're feeling pressured or too scared to leave and to stop. Also may work in an industry where it may be common to be pressured into performing sex acts for money, such as a strip club or illicit massage businesses as well. Those are just two examples. An individual may have an inconsistent or well-rehearsed story about the relationship that they're with the person that they're with, or how they got to a location, how they traveled there, things like that. They may have a pimp or a manager. Sometimes they may not even know that the language is a pimp or a trafficker, right? Or the manager. They may refer to this person as their boyfriend or their friend or their wife or their husband, right? We've also seen a lot of familial trafficking where we have parents and folks in a family that are trafficking other members of the family. They may live where they work or transport to work/home, and their movements are also monitored. Living in inhumane conditions provided by that employer, and also there might be signs of physical or emotional abuse. So again, there's many different indicators that can present themselves, and sometimes it is very, very hard for victims to even identify themselves as being a victim of trafficking. So some experiences that victims may have, number one is complex trauma, right? There's so many layers to the trafficking dynamic. This individual may have met someone and that trafficker ended up being, again, a friend, a loved one in the beginning, and later on they change how they're interacting with that person. This complex trauma, similar to a domestic violence situation, right? And so you have this power and control dynamics that happen. You have the honeymoon phase, the tension building phase, right? And then the explosion. All those things can also be seen within trafficking as well. A lot of victims may also believe that they deserved it, right? Like, I said yes this one time. I'm at fault for what has happened. They deal with a lot of shame and guilt and blame. There might be also substance abuse dependency, whether they already had that dependency or the trafficker introduced it to them, or they ended up becoming a dependent, and it's a way of numbing and coping with their experiences. Again, there might be romantic involvement, sexual assault, physical violence. Trauma bonding is a huge part of what we see that victims experience in trafficking as well. Some cultural barriers or language barriers, food and sleep restriction, medical deprivation as well. If they have any sort of medical needs, a lot of times traffickers may not allow the individual to seek medical attention, or if they do allow them to seek medical attention, there's so much power, control, and fear that's instilled in that individual They don't know how to receive help, or folks that they're in contact with may not even know what signs to look for to help them. Even having no ID or travel documents, it can be so difficult for someone who has been trafficked to be able to just have their driver's license or just their ID, because they need, you need your passport, you need your birth certificate, you need your social security number, all these different kind of things that they may not be able to have access to. There's also a sense of loyalty to that perpetrator as well. They showed up for them one time or a number of times. And so this is a sense of betrayal that might also be present that becomes a barrier as to why they may not be ready or able to even recognize what they're experiencing is trafficking. Next slide. So here's just some highlights when it comes to healthcare. There was a study that was done, and it talked about there's 98 people that answered questions about things that they experienced in the healthcare facilities. And it's 62% of them went to a hospital or an ER. 29% went to Planned Parenthood, and 22% went to a regular doctor. The physical problems that they had neurological stuff like memory, insomnia, poor concentration, headaches, migraines. A lot of times individuals are physically hit as well. And so you just think about the trauma in the brain that they experience. 85% have about general health issues, including eating disorders, nutrition. A lot of folks that are survivors of trafficking during their victimization, they were not receiving, healthy meals and vitamins and all this kind of stuff. So it definitely impacts on their health. Psychological complaints include depression, shame and guilt, flashbacks, attempted suicide. There's so much levels to what an individual may be experiencing when they have been trafficked. So that journey to recovery for sure can take some time, but it takes a collaborative effort from different providers and for them to also feel and believe that they are safe. So here in Ohio, there are a number of times where there are large operations that happen across the state. This one happened in September 2023. It was called Operations Buyer's Remorse. And the reason why it was called that and the reason why it was kind of addressed in this way is when it comes to trafficking, you can't have a supply without a demand, right? And so to understand that there are individuals that are fueling the demand for victimizations of individuals. And so the Operations Buyer Remorse was done to be able to address and to get in front of and to hold accountable those that are out seeking to purchase sex. Those are the buyers that are out there buying sex. And so there was 160 people that were arrested for this, for folks who answered ads and who showed up to be able to buy sex from individuals. And some of the backgrounds that you can see that included individuals who were EMT, who were nurses, who were former law enforcement officers and retirees, right? Those who buy sex, they can look like and be like anybody. There isn't a specific age range or a job specific thing or amount of money. It comes down to disposable income and those that are willing and wanting to purchase sex from other people. Also, there was 11 massage parlors that were searched and 104 victims were identified and provided services. Lindsay, if there's any further you want to add to this operation, feel free to chime in.
No, Jamel, I think you covered it well.
Okay, awesome. Next slide. So we like to also talk a lot about being victim-centered, right? And what's important about that. Here's what some survivors have said, what victim-centered means to them. Having an environment that we create is super important, right? And so these spaces, these are pictures of a soft room, and just recognizing that the environment when we're going to talk to someone, it matters. And so at the bottom picture, you see what might look like your typical, what people kind of think of an interrogation or law enforcement interview room. Having a space that is soft, that is conducive to these conversations, and for a victim to feel like they are not being seen as a perpetrator, it just really helps as they're sharing their story. Support without judgment. They've already experienced so many things, right? So having a judgment-free zone goes a long way in breaking down that barrier of trust when it comes to law enforcement and victim services. There are no ulterior motives, that you're just going to be there, right? So if you are working with a survivor or a victim of trafficking, making sure that you're not making promises that you can't keep, right? And that you are showing up when you say that you're going to be able to show up. understand that they may also feel the need to protect other people, right? And that's so often, you know, a thing that happens, whether it's other victims or they even feel like they are loyal, they have to protect their trafficker as well. Again, that complex trauma, that trauma bond that's there, that also might be something that they're working through. Listen carefully, recognize that their voice matters, and for such a long time, their voice has been taken away. And so empowering individuals that their voice matters and that their people are willing to listen to what they have to say and believe them goes a long way. Also, victims have diverse needs, right? There is no cookie cutter way of addressing and helping a survivor of trafficking. Recognize that each individual, something is important to them, and communicating with them to understand what are their needs and what's important to them, and addressing things moving forward. Again, trauma experiences are unique and impactful. And again, that victim and offender relationship can be super, super complex. Some challenges that survivors have talked about that they have experienced is there's limited support for long-term needs, right? And so here in the state of Ohio, we are for sure a lot further along today than we were 10 years ago, but there's still so much that is needed for survivors, for them to be able to receive the resources and services to assist them on their road to recovery. Recognize that immigration status can sometimes affect access as well. Their ability to be able to work, or their ability to go to certain places, that might also be an issue for them, to be able to have medical needs addressed in social services. Language barriers can also be a barrier for folks, and even just cultural understanding, right? And so being able to take the time that if you're going to speak with a survivor or a victim, there is a language barrier, that you're being intentional with having an interpreter that's present. That way there's nothing that's lost in communication. Helpers and helping system can cause harm. The number of times that I've worked with survivors and victims of trafficking, where there is a fear of law enforcement, there's a fear of mental health services, there's a fear of the court system, right? There's a fear of children's services, you name it, all these different services that are in place to assist. Sometimes they've had negative experiences with those same services. And so recognizing that they may have experienced harm previously, and seeing how can you be able to change that narrative, and these new interactions, you can kind of almost repaint, help them repaint and retell what's going on in their life. They can be able to get connected with services. They need to feel safe and have reliable transportation. The trafficker many times, even though there was harm that was happening, there was also a routine that was happening, right? They knew what the trafficker is going to do, what they're going to say, if they're going to pick them up, what's going to happen today, tomorrow, that kind of stuff. Recognizing that as much as we want to come in and swoop in and say, hey, we're here to help and save you and remove you from the situation, there are these things that are coming to that survivor's mind that they're thinking about, what about tomorrow? How am I going to get to this therapist appointment that you've been able to set up for me? You know, has anybody thought about that? So just keeping those things in mind, and the location of where certain services may be housed could be a trigger for that survivor. Men and boys need support too. We can really focus on, I say we as a general community, really focus on women and girls being victims and survivors of trafficking, but our men and our boys who are survivors and victims, they need the support service as well, and they have experienced victimization. And so it's super important that we don't overlook the men and boys that have experienced things, or the people who are non-binary or or identify LGBTQ. How can we be just really intentional with meeting their needs and just not looking at victims as only looking one particular way? Criminal records are also an issue, right? Many times traffickers will have victims commit certain crimes or engage in certain things, and this individual now has a criminal record. And so as we come in contact with them and saying, hey, we're here to help, how can we help you? Their concern might be, there's these criminal records that exist. The trafficker made me do these things. What options are available for me? And again, family law struggles, right? So I've worked with victims and survivors where they're working on trying to get their custody back from their kids, or even doing visitation, or trying to get a protection order, or divorce from their traffickers. All these different things are present that a survivor is thinking of. So within HSI, we have what's called the VAP program, Victim Assistance Program, which is where I fall under. And under our Victim Assistance Program, we have a Victim Assistance Specialist, which is myself, and we also have a Forensic Interview Specialist. And we both have different roles. The victim interview, the forensic interview specialist, they are the ones that interview and talk with the victims, and they do it in a trauma-informed and trauma-competent way. And then my role and my job is to help connect that victim with resources and services in their area or whatever needs that they may have, and inform them of their rights and just do all the things that they need to be supported. So we also support Homeland Security by ensuring that investigations are victim-centered. We aid victims of federal crimes as they move through the investigative service, and also ensure that victims have access to the rights and services to which they are entitled to by law. So again, I help provide victim rights to individuals, inform them what services are available. I make referrals for emergency medical or social services that might also include counseling or treatment, provide information on victims' compensation, on restitution, and just kind of help them walk through what does this criminal justice process look like on this end of it. Now they are considered a victim of a federal crime. So these are some of the rights here under the Crime Victim Rights Act. All victims of crime, this is their rights to know these things, to be protected from the accused, to be able to know when there are certain court hearings that are happening, the right to be heard at public proceedings as well, the right to confer and talk to the government, aka talk with the prosecutor on the case, the right to full and timely restitution provided by law. So all these things are examples of victim rights that every victim has the right to have. And no one agency, no one, whether you're government or nonprofit, can do it by themselves, right? It takes teamwork. It takes teamwork for all of us to work together. And something called a multidisciplinary team. We all play different roles and have different strengths, and we all need to work together for the benefit and the service of the victim that we are all supporting. So just some additional assistance for folks that have any sort of immigration matters. So some other immigration relief matters include what's called continued presence. This is a temporary immigration status. They get 2 years if they are a victim of human trafficking, and they're able to receive certain federal and state benefits. There's also a U visa and a T visa. This has more of a long-term immigration relief. They both can be 4 years. 4 years long, and they can self-petition. So a victim can be able to self-petition to have this relief. It also comes with employment authorization documentation, which means that they can be able to work while they are in the process of applying for a U and a T visa. So some lessons learned that's really important to keep in mind is keeping victims informed that language and cultural barriers exist. Immigration status and relief, it matters. Ongoing safety assessments are super, super, super important. And so what felt safe today may not feel safe a month from now or 6 months from now. So always having that ongoing conversation. Cases are resource and labor intensive, and partnerships are essential. Again, I cannot stress enough that we can't do this by ourselves. We are all in this together. And those of you that are watching this today, you all now get to play a part and play a role in the next steps in someone's road to recovery from being trafficked. Here's just some information and resources where you can be able to find more things to help you understand trafficking. So we have the HSI tip line as well for people to call in. There's also the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. I suggest you all put this in your phones. There's also a hotline text number as well. So Polaris Project is who runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. That's their website there. Also the Blue Campaign from the Department of Homeland Security. You can be able to find a number of resources and information on there as well. This is my contact information. It says Spurlock on the end of it because I'm in the process of getting my last name changed to my married name. So if you guys see Spurlock one place and Arid another place, that's why. That's my work cell, and again, my email address. And I believe there are some questions in the chat. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat with us, and hopefully now we'll be able to start addressing some of your questions.
Thank you. And yes, we have several questions. I'm Jasmine Butler, Administrative Director for Congresswoman Brown. We're going to try to consolidate some of these questions and individualized questions we will touch base with the participants offline with. So first question from Rhonda is asking about sharing the PowerPoint. And similarly, Joey asked about the video links, if they can be shared for guided conversations. So I will share from our office, you will be able to find a live recording of this on the Congresswoman's website, and I'll pass it over to the DHS team to answer questions about the videos.
Okay, so like Jasmine just said, you'll be able to get a copy of this recorded presentation. Unfortunately, we do not email out or make available the slides as you saw them on the screen. We do have resource pamphlets that we can make arrangements to get them distributable, as well as I do believe that pamphlet that we have, or it's like a one-sheet flyer, it does show the video titles as well as an appropriate thumbnail that you will be able to locate them very easily, I believe, just on YouTube. They all are free videos that we accessed from YouTube and pulled into our presentation.
Awesome. Rhonda also asks, how can the attendees get more involved?
So talk to your schools. I know that I am a local presenter for the Cleveland office for a little bit more extensive internet safety presentation that we can actually go out to local middle school and high schools to kind of bring this information directly to your children and kind of emphasize like how important it is to be mindful of what they're doing online, know what to do in the event that, you know, kids are kids. They're gonna be kids. They're gonna do the wrong things. They're gonna mess up, but we want them to know that regardless, you will protect them, we will protect them, and they're going to make it through, and they don't need to resort to dangerous behavior as a result. So I would say that's probably a good way to get involved. One, have open, honest conversations with your kids, and two, potentially talk to your school administrators about getting in contact with us, requesting a presentation similar to this one. That way we can kind of just take you out as the middleman in a sort of way and get this information into the hands of the kids directly.
Thank you. Stephen asks about any statistics around suicide for our minors, and if you have any idea about the number of individuals that target children that have been prosecuted.
Yes. So as far as numbers for minor suicides go, we're waiting on a lot of data, right? It's kind of I want to call it a trend because that sounds horrible, but it is something that we're seeing trend upward, but we don't have a lot of numbers. My supervisor was able to find at least one statistic here and I can read this for you so it's accurate. Since October of 21, the earliest that we have started tracking these numbers is at least 20 children, and that was current as of March of 23. So a little outdated. I hate to say that there have been additional since, but I'm sure there have been. But yes, and then as far as those that engage in the sextortion of children, I wouldn't be able to give an accurate number for prosecution because I only represent one agency. I can only speak to my own cases and my co-cases and what, you know, the other agents in my office do, which, I mean, if we get a case that has to do with sextortion, we push for the prosecution of it. Our prosecutors, especially at the federal level, take it incredibly seriously. The case that I mentioned in Ravenna, that was actually my case, and it was sentenced a few days ago. So, and that was also a sextortion type case where he was extorting children for additional images and videos of themselves, with a lot of online threats. So it is real. I found that in my own cases, offenders will stop at nothing to make a child feel as though they have nowhere else to go except comply. And so again, that's why we really, really harp, and I apologize for being repetitive, but it's just that important to tell your kids, like, hey, you're going to mess up. It's going to be okay. I won't be disappointed. I want to help you. I don't ever want you to be in a situation where you feel as though you have to give in to these bad guys, because people online are not always who they seem, and that's not your fault.
Thank you. An anonymous attendee is asking about the possibility of someone from your team being able to come and host a campus presentation.
As far as college campuses, sure, yeah, we do. I would say we do. I've got presentations for adults and teachers, just general adults. I mean, that would be probably college, and then also the middle school and high school level. They're all just a little bit different, tailored to the age bracket.
Thank you. Jean is asking about the type of recovery services that are available for children.
Yeah, there's a number of different resources. So it depends on the child, right? And so counseling is always a great option. When we're talking about sextortion and online exploitation, NCMEC, which stands for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they also have something called Team Hope. And what Team Hope is, they have a number of individuals that offer peer support, where they either themselves have experienced the similar things or their family members of folks who've experienced the same things. So they can have someone that actually walks alongside them that can say, hey, I understand what you're feeling, what you're going through. We've been there, right? They also offer connecting with counseling and therapists that kind of specialize in online exploitation, victimization as well. They help with legal things. NCMEC also has something called Take It Down. So if there are things that are online that can assist with taking things down, help getting it reported to law enforcement is also an option. So you have a number of those things, but counseling usually is one of the first things that parents are wanting to get their kids connected with, and also having the conversation of what does online safety look like, right? And who are trusted adults, who are trusted peers that you have in your life. And sometimes just being able to identify that and do some safety planning can really go a long way as well.
We have a lot of questions that are centered around contact information. You will be able to find that on our website when we post this video. And we'll make sure to send this out to all of the registrants as well. So no worries there. A question from, an anonymous attendee asking about how you can decipher if someone is being trafficked or if they are consensually doing sex work.
I'll start with this one. So when we talk about sex work and we talk about prostitution, but I think the larger question and understanding needs also to come down to is what is happening in this person's life, right? That this is where they are making money. And so for a number of individuals, they talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? And so they end up in this situation, and this is the only option that either they've been taught or they've been pushed into. And there's this push-pull factors. Sometimes that's poverty. Sometimes there is trauma and abuse. That's what's going on. To recognize that even though somebody may be, we'd like to talk about maybe consensual, but what does consensual mean? If those vulnerabilities were not present, would they still be doing that, right? So that's just something to consider. But to kind of create an easy, what's the difference? I like to call it a 2 versus 3. When you have 2 consenting individuals, right? And let's say there aren't any barriers, there aren't any push-pull factors that are present, it's just those 2 individuals. When trafficking is involved, there's a third party. You have the buyer, the seller, you have the person who is controlling, right? The person who's maybe setting up the dates, who's taking the money, who's dictating all the different things, who's doing the force, fraud, and the coercion. So when trafficking is happening, there is a third party that is involved.
And due to a time constraint, this will be our last question, unfortunately, but definitely don't hesitate to reach out to our office if you have questions after this event. So the next question, is someone we know was given tainted money, which caused them to feel drowsy. So sorry, that was a comment. Last question from Jermaine. How are you able to help children who are being exploited and their family is either part of it or otherwise not able to help or take responsibility?
So that usually falls under familial trafficking if you're saying that the family members are being part of that individual's exploitation. Children's Services normally gets involved in regards to that because that child is no longer in a safe environment. there are different programs that exist that might have housing. Sometimes it's foster parents, sometimes it's safe houses. It all just depends on what's beneficial for that child and what the child needs. If there's any mental health concerns, any drug addiction concerns, things like that. Do they have any other safe people in their life that they can be able to be housed with or not? There's also certain court dockets that exist for youth that are court involved as well and that have also experienced victimization. It's called a safe harbor docket that they're able to also get connected with and have a guardian ad litem and have supportive services that are given to them through the court system. There's no easy plug and play, this is how this works and it's going to be fine. Everybody's journey is different. Everybody's experience is different. And the level of trauma someone's experienced as well can just take time. And we've seen sometimes that there are folks who are adults that we're learning about in their victimization, but they've been victimized since they were children, right? And so there's a continuous nature of victimization that someone may be experiencing. So it just kind of all depends on what those needs are, how early we get involved as a law enforcement agency, and also what other things they've been able to get exposed to for help and assistance, and how can we reintroduce them to those things.
Thank you. And with that, we'll turn it over to Congresswoman Brown for closing remarks.
Jasmine, and thank you to everyone from Homeland Security for joining us today and sharing so much important information. What's happening with human trafficking is alarming, it's frightening, and you can tell by the questions in the chat, it's very concerning. But the good news is we are not powerless. And the more information we have, the more power we have. As I said in my opening, there's real bipartisan support for fighting this problem in Congress, and the Biden administration is committed as well. And it's a big priority for my office, and we will continue to look for ways to help educate people, support anti-trafficking legislation, and support survivors. So finally, we're going to post this webinar on our website and our social media channels as well. So if you have friends and family who are interested, please share that link with them as well. You can also find more information at dhs.gov/Blue Campaign. Again, that's dhs.gov/Blue Campaign. And if you have any questions about any federal issues, please contact my office at 216-522-4900. We're happy to help. Thank you again and have a great day.